in the shadowed corners of history, where the ink of treaties dries and the steel of swords cools, there exists a battlefield few men have ever learned to see. It is a landscape of whispers, of silences, of glances that carry the weight of armies. Niccolò Machiavelli, that surveyor of the grim architecture of human ambition, understood a chilling truth: power is a phantom. It rarely resides where crowns glint or fists are raised. It is a current that flows beneath the visible world, a ghost in the machine of empire and order. And in this hidden world, women have long been the silent sovereigns. Men, in their devotion to the tangible, have forever mistaken the clamor of conflict for the essence of power. They see the fortress, the legion, the declared war. They measure strength in acreage and body counts, in the blunt arithmetic of force. This is the masculine theater of dominance, a stage built of granite and steel, where power announces itself with the roar of a cannon. It is a power that seeks to conquer, to own, to impose its will through visible, irrefutable strength. It is loud, it is proud, and it is, to the discerning eye, profoundly naive. For there is another power, one that does not declare itself. A power that thrives not in the noise, but in the stillness that follows. It is the power of quiet influence, a force Machiavelli would have recognized not in the prince, but in the queen who observes from the shadows. This is a power that does not need to conquer territory, for it conquers the will. It does not need to raise an army, for it commands the commanders. It is a power that grows in the soil of underestimation, nourished by the arrogance of those who see only what is presented to them. Consider the dimly lit Renaissance chamber, where shadows stretch like grasping fingers across stone walls. A man in armor, his breastplate gleaming with the vanity of his station, sits unaware. He believes himself the master of his domain, the center of his world. Yet, in the background, a woman observes. Her eyes, piercing and patient, are the true command center of the room. She is not on the throne, but her gaze holds the weight of the crown. Her power is not in the sword at her side, but in the knowledge she holds, in the emotional currents she navigates with a terrifying grace. This is the hidden battlefield. It is not a place of open warfare, but of strategic positioning. The chessboard of life, as seen through a Machiavellian lens, is not what it appears. The pawns, so often mistaken for men of action and will, are moved by forces they do not comprehend. And the queen, that silent, towering piece in the shadows, does not need to storm the enemy's castle. Her faint, ethereal glow is a beacon of an entirely different kind of warfare, one fought not with muscle and steel, but with insight, patience, and the unsettling truth that the most potent control is the one that is never perceived. Men have ignored this battlefield for centuries, and in their ignorance, they have already surrendered. Control, for a man, is a fortress built of external things. He amasses wealth, believing its weight can anchor his reality. He climbs the ladder of titles and positions, certain that the higher he stands, the more of the world he commands. He hones his physical strength, convinced that the force of his body is the ultimate arbiter of his will. These are the pillars of his kingdom, the visible architecture of his power. He sits on his throne, clad in the armor of his achievements, and declares himself ruler. But Machiavelli, ever the cynic of appearances, warned that the truest influence often hides beneath the cloak of obedience. The man who believes he is in control because he gives the orders is a fool. He is a king who sees only the bowing heads of his courtiers, and not the subtle, intricate web of whispers and alliances that truly governs his court. He is a puppet, so enamored with the crown on his head that he never feels the tug of the strings. The secret power that women wield, the power that Machiavellian insight reveals, is one that grows in the negative spaces. It thrives in the silence, in the void left by the man's booming commands. It is nurtured in what is not said, what is not seen, what is not openly resisted. While the man is busy building his fortress of external validation, This other power is seeping into the foundations, silent and unseen, like water into stone. Imagine a powerful king upon his throne, a portrait of masculine authority. He is the sun in his own solar system, and all revolves around him. Yet, if one could see into the shadows, one would notice the faint, almost invisible threads extending from a hidden figure behind the throne. These are the strings of the puppet master, woven from observation, emotional intelligence, and a deep, unnerving understanding of the king's own desires and fears. The king believes he is the master of his destiny, but in reality, his will is merely a reflection of a will he has never acknowledged. This is the illusion of control. The man believes he is the storm, yet he is merely the ship being tossed upon a sea whose currents he cannot perceive. The woman's power in this dynamic is not a challenge to his authority, but a quiet absorption of it. She does not need to fight him for the throne, for she controls the man who sits upon it. Consider the surreal portrait of a woman whose lips are sealed by a single, golden thread. A man might see this as a symbol of her silence, her submission. He might believe that he has rendered her powerless. But her eyes, blazing with a fire of unyielding authority, tell a different story. The sealed lips are not a cage, but a weapon. They are the source of her mystique, the guardians of her true intentions. In her silence, she forces the world to project its own fears and desires onto her. She becomes a mirror in which men see not her, but themselves. And in that reflection, she finds all the leverage she will ever need. The control men believe they have is a grand, elaborate play, and they are, almost always, the only ones in the room who do not know they are merely actors. In the great and terrible theater of human interaction, the most potent weapon is often the one that is mistaken for a shield. The power that women have cultivated over millennia is a masterclass in this form of strategic deception. It is a power that comes disguised, wrapped in the soft fabrics of perceived weakness. The mask of fragility, the veil of innocence, the posture of passivity. These are not confessions of powerlessness. They are the instruments of a deep and chilling psychological mastery. Men, conditioned to respond to direct challenges and overt displays of strength, are uniquely vulnerable to this form of influence. They see a fragile flower and feel compelled to protect it, never suspecting that the roots of that flower are slowly, inexorably wrapping around the foundations of their own strength. They see innocence and lower their guard, never imagining that behind that wide-eyed gaze lies a mind of calculating brilliance. They see passivity and assume compliance, never realizing that this stillness is the calm before a perfectly timed and devastatingly effective storm. Machiavelli, who understood the profound chasm between appearance and reality, would have recognized this strategy at once. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand. He wrote, "For everyone sees what you appear to be, few really know what you are." This is the core of the feminine strategy. The world is full of common men who are impressed by what a thing seems to be, and in this world, the woman who masters the art of the mask becomes a formidable, almost invisible force. Imagine a woman in a simple white dress, her face a portrait of serene vulnerability. In her hands, she holds a delicate porcelain mask, its features painted with an expression of gentle submission. A man, observing this scene, would likely be moved by a sense of protectiveness, a desire to shield her from the harshness of the world. But if he were to look closer, if he had the eyes to see past the performance, he would notice the glint of steel in her eyes behind the mask. He would see that her expression is not one of weakness, but of sharp, calculating assessment. The mask is not for her. It is for him. It is a tool to disarm him, to make him reveal his own strengths and weaknesses, his desires and his fears. Illuminated by the flickering candlelight, she is not the lamb she appears to be, but the shepherdess, guiding the flock with a gentle, yet unbreakable hand. This duality is unsettling, for it subverts the natural order of things as men perceive it. It is the dove that morphs into a serpent mid-flight, a transformation that is at once elegant and terrifying. The man who falls for the illusion of the dove is the one who is most vulnerable to the serpent's bite. He is the one who, in his arrogance, dismisses the subtle signs, the fleeting moments of cold calculation that betray the mask. The feminine mask is a work of art, a masterpiece of psychological warfare. It allows a woman to navigate a world built on the foundations of masculine power without ever having to engage in a direct confrontation. She does not need to shatter the walls of the fortress. She simply finds the one unguarded gate left open for the seemingly harmless. And once inside, she does not need to seize the throne. She need only control the king. The mask is not a sign of weakness. It is the ultimate expression of a hidden and far more terrifying strength. Seduction, in the clumsy hands of the uninitiated, is a mere transaction of the flesh. But in the grand Machiavellian theater of power, it is a far more sophisticated and devastating art. It is not simply sexual, though it may wear that intoxicating disguise. True seduction is intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. It is the art of becoming the answer to a question someone never knew they were asking. It is the slow, deliberate weaving of a web of desire so subtle that the target believes they are walking freely, even as they become inextricably entangled. The master seducer understands a fundamental truth of human nature. Men are not ruled by necessity, but by desire. Give a man what he needs and you have made him comfortable. But discover what he craves, what he secretly yearns for in the silent chambers of his soul, and you have found the key to his will. This is the essence of seduction as a strategy. It is the art of drawing power by first offering a glimpse of that which is most craved, and then, with chilling precision, withholding it. This dance of offering and withholding creates a psychological vacuum, a state of perpetual longing that consumes the target's thoughts and emotions. The object of desire becomes an obsession, a fixed point in the ever-spinning compass of the mind. The seducer, by controlling this object, controls the man. It is a form of power that does not need to be asserted, for it is willingly, even eagerly, surrendered. Consider a grand Renaissance ballroom, a swirling vortex of silks, jewels, and masculine ambition. Men of power and influence vie for attention, their voices a cacophony of self-importance. Yet, in this crowded room, all eyes are drawn to a single figure, a woman in a crimson dress who stands apart from the throng. Her face is half-shadowed, her expression a tantalizing enigma. She does not seek attention. She commands it by her very stillness. The men are captivated not by what she says or does, but by the vast, mysterious space she creates around herself. She is a riddle they feel compelled to solve, a prize they ache to possess. And in their desperate attempts to win her favor, they reveal everything about themselves. Their vanities, their insecurities, their deepest desires. She, in turn, reveals nothing. She is a mirror, reflecting their own longing back at them, amplified and intensified. The symbol of this dark art is the glowing red rose, held delicately in a woman's hand. It is a perfect, intoxicating bloom, a promise of beauty and passion. But upon closer inspection, one sees that its thorns are not of wood, but of sharpened steel, and they drip not with dew, but with a dark, viscous ink. This is the true nature of seduction as a weapon. It is the promise of paradise, intertwined with the ever-present threat of a hidden danger. The very thing that draws you in is the thing that can destroy you. The man who believes he is pursuing a woman is often the one being led. He is following a trail of breadcrumbs laid out with meticulous care, a path that leads not to conquest, but to his own subtle, almost imperceptible enslavement. He believes he is the hunter, but he is, in fact, the prey. Seduction is not a game of hearts. It is a game of power. And in this game, the one who controls desire controls everything. In a world drowning in noise, where men scramble to fill every available space with their opinions, their boasts, and their hollow proclamations of strength, the most potent weapon is often the one that makes no sound at all. Silence. It is not an absence of power, but a terrifying concentration of it. What is withheld, what is left unsaid, often dominates a room, a relationship, a kingdom, far more than what is spoken. Men, in their endless quest for validation, feel an anxious compulsion to speak. They believe that their words are the primary currency of their influence, that to be silent is to be weak, to be overlooked. They spill their thoughts, their plans, their intentions, believing that in doing so, they are asserting their control over the narrative. They are tragically mistaken. In their torrent of words, they give everything away. They provide a blueprint of their minds, a map of their desires and fears, for anyone patient enough to simply listen. The strategic use of silence, a tactic well understood by the quietly powerful, flips this dynamic on its head. Silence is not passive. It is an active, aggressive force. It creates a space, a void, that others feel an overwhelming urge to fill. In the face of silence, men become unnerved. They project their own insecurities, their own guilt, their own hidden agendas into that still, quiet space. They reveal themselves, layer by layer, in a desperate attempt to elicit a response. The silent observer, in turn, simply watches, gathers information, and gains an almost insurmountable strategic advantage. Machiavelli, a master of concealed intentions, understood this principle deeply. Never reveal everything is a core tenet of his philosophy, for mystery is the soil in which power and fear grow. Once a man is fully known, he is predictable. And once he is predictable, he is controllable. The woman who masters the art of silence makes herself unreadable, an enigma that can never be fully solved. Her stillness becomes a source of immense psychological tension, a weight that others feel compelled to alleviate. Imagine a grand, candlelit hall filled with the boisterous, overlapping voices of ambitious men. They argue, they debate, they posture, each one fighting to be heard above the din. But in the center of this chaos sits a single woman, wrapped in a profound and impenetrable silence. Her stillness is not a sign of disengagement. It is the epicenter of the room's power. The men, one by one, find their voices faltering, their arguments trailing off. Their eyes are drawn to her, to the quiet authority she exudes without uttering a single word. Her silence commands the scene, forcing them to question themselves, to wonder what she knows, what she is thinking. The noise of the room bends around her stillness, and in that moment, she is the one in control. The surrealist image of a mouth, sealed not by force but by a will of iron, glowing faintly like locked gates, captures the essence of this power. Whispers, like ethereal smoke, may leak from the edges, but the core of her thoughts, her true intentions, remain securely locked away. Her silence is not emptiness. It is a fortress, and men, in their frantic attempts to breach its walls, only succeed in revealing their own vulnerabilities. The greatest battles are not won by the loudest shouts, but by the most disciplined and unnerving silence. In the cold calculus of power, there is an entire dimension of warfare that most men, in their stoic pride, choose to ignore. They dismiss it, mislabel it as mere sensitivity or feminine intuition, and in doing so, they leave their flanks catastrophically exposed. This ignored dimension is the realm of emotion, and those who master its currents hold a terrifying power over those who pretend it does not exist. Women, for centuries, have been the silent masters of this domain, wielding emotional intelligence not as a tool for connection, but as a weapon of unparalleled subtlety and effectiveness. Men pride themselves on their logic, their reason, their ability to remain detached from the messy, unpredictable tides of feeling. They see emotion as a weakness, a corrupting influence that clouds judgment and undermines strength. They build dams of stoicism to hold back the flood, believing that what they cannot see cannot harm them. Yet, as Machiavelli knew, the great movements of history, the rise and fall of empires, the passions of love, the brutal calculus of war, are all driven by the very emotional tides that men so arrogantly dismiss. Emotional intelligence, in its most strategic form, is the ability to control the rhythm, the tone, and the atmosphere of any human interaction. It is the power to subtly shift the emotional landscape, to create currents of fear, desire, guilt, or hope that pull others in a desired direction. The woman who possesses this skill does not need to win an argument with logic. She simply changes the emotional weather of the room until the argument becomes irrelevant. She can soothe a rising anger with a well-timed word of comfort, or she can ignite a simmering resentment with a single, piercing glance. She plays upon the emotional vulnerabilities of others like a harpist plucking at strings, creating a melody of compliance that her target is often not even aware they are dancing to. Imagine a battlefield split down the middle. On one side, men clad in heavy armor clash with swords and shields, their faces contorted with the brutish effort of open conflict. It is a scene of noise, chaos, and brute force. But on the other side of the field, unseen by the combatants, a woman sits calmly, playing a harp. Her melody is soft, almost imperceptible against the din of battle, yet it is the true force governing the field. With a shift in the music's key, she can sow discord and confusion among the enemy ranks. With a change in its rhythm, she can inspire courage and resilience in her own. The men believe they are fighting a war of steel, but they are, in fact, fighting a war of atmosphere, and she is the one in command. This is the power of emotional leverage. It is the surreal portrait of a face, split into two halves. One side is soft, nurturing, and empathetic. The face she presents to the world, the mask that disarms and invites trust. The other side, hidden in shadow, is dark, manipulative, and chillingly aware. The face of the strategist who understands that the human heart is the most vulnerable and exploitable of all territories. The man who sees only the light is the one most easily consumed by the darkness. He who ignores the power of emotion is destined to become its slave. True power, the kind that endures beyond the fleeting triumphs of brute force, is an invisible architecture. It does not announce itself with trumpets or grand decrees. It works in the quiet spaces, in the subtle currents of human interaction, a form of tyranny so nuanced that its subjects are often unaware of their own subjugation. This is the realm of influence, a power that shapes the will rather than coercing the body. It is a kingdom where a whisper, delivered at the right moment, can outweigh the thundering command of a king. Men are often blind to this form of power because they are conditioned to look for the overt symbols of authority. They see the crown, the scepter, the army, and they believe they have located the source of control. They fail to understand that these are merely the stagecraft of power, the dramatic props in a play directed by unseen hands. The real gears of history, as Machiavelli would attest, are often moved by those who appear to be the most powerless. The servant who has the king's ear, the wife who counsels him in the quiet of the bedchamber, the seemingly insignificant courtier who understands the intricate web of desires and fears that motivates the powerful. These are the true architects of destiny. Influence is a slow, patient poison. It does not kill the body, but it subtly, inexorably, replaces the will of another with one's own. It is the art of planting an idea in someone's mind and nurturing it so skillfully that they come to believe it was their own brilliant insight. It is the ability to frame a choice in such a way that there is only one logical conclusion, a conclusion that serves the influencer's hidden agenda. It is a form of control so complete that it feels like freedom. Consider a dimly lit throne room, where a powerful king sits in judgment. Courtiers bow before him, their faces a mask of deference. To the casual observer, the king is the absolute center of power. But look closer. His queen stands beside the throne, her lips close to his ear, whispering a single inaudible phrase. As she speaks, her shadow, cast by the flickering torchlight, stretches across the floor, growing until it looms larger and more imposing than that of the king himself. In that moment, the true hierarchy of the room is revealed. The king may hold the scepter, but she holds the king. His decisions are not his own. They are the echoes of her silent words. This is the subtle tyranny of influence. It is the symbolic painting of a small, delicate hand nudging a giant, glowing wheel of fate. The hand does not have the strength to turn the wheel by force, but with a precise and perfectly timed push, it can alter its course forever. The men who believe that power is a game of strength will always be outmaneuvered by those who understand that it is, in fact, a game of leverage. They spend their lives trying to smash down the door, while the master of influence has already been given the key. They are the roaring lion, magnificent and terrifying, but ultimately outwitted by the silent, weaving spider. And by the time the lion realizes he is trapped in the web, it is already far too late. In the rigid, hierarchical world that men construct, submission is seen as the ultimate admission of defeat. It is a bending of the knee, a lowering of the gaze, a surrender of the will. To the masculine ego, it is a state synonymous with weakness, a position to be avoided at all costs. This fundamental misunderstanding, this arrogant blindness to the strategic potential of perceived powerlessness, is one of the most significant and exploitable flaws in the male psyche. Many men mistake the posture of submission for the reality of weakness, and in doing so, they willingly walk into the most elegant of traps. For in the Machiavellian art of power, appearance is a weapon, and the guise of obedience is one of the most effective tools for disarming suspicion. To appear compliant, to feign submission, is to lull your opponent into a state of comfortable superiority. It is to encourage their arrogance, to make them lower their guard, and to grant you the time and space to maneuver in the shadows. Strategic compliance is not a surrender. It is the long, patient game of the predator who mimics the stillness of stone to draw its prey closer. It is the art of hiding long-term domination behind the mask of short-term obedience. The woman who masters this art becomes a force that men are utterly unprepared to confront. She does not challenge their authority directly, for she knows that a direct confrontation only strengthens their resolve. Instead, she yields, she agrees, she supports, she becomes the perfect, dutiful subject. And the man, his ego flattered and his dominance affirmed, sees her not as a threat, but as an extension of his own will. He grows comfortable, complacent, and increasingly dependent on her seemingly unwavering support. He does not realize that with every act of submission, she is weaving another thread in the web that will eventually constrain him. Imagine a queen kneeling at the feet of a powerful king. His hand rests upon her head in a gesture of paternalistic control. He sees before him a symbol of his own absolute authority. But if one were to look at their shadows, cast upon the wall behind them, a different story would unfold. The king's shadow is stooped and unimpressive, but the shadow of the kneeling woman rises up, towering over him, a dark and majestic figure with a crown of its own. The physical act of submission is an illusion, a piece of theater designed to conceal the true balance of power in the room. He rules the body that kneels before him, but she rules the mind that is foolish enough to believe it is in control. This is the myth of submission laid bare. It is the surreal image of a bird, its leg bound by a single, delicate chain. It sits within a cage, the very picture of captivity. Yet the cage door is wide open. The bird is not trapped. It chooses to stay. Its submission is a performance, a strategic choice that serves a hidden purpose. The man who sees only the cage and the chain will never understand the true nature of the bird's power. He will believe he is the zookeeper, when in fact, he is merely a visitor in a world he does not and cannot comprehend. The greatest power is not the one that breaks chains, but the one that makes its cage a throne. In the masculine pursuit of power, speed is often mistaken for strength. The world of men is a world of frantic action, of rushing to conquest, of a desperate and breathless race to the summit. They believe that to hesitate is to lose, that to wait is to be weak. They are the sprinters, expending all their energy in a glorious, explosive burst, seeking immediate victory and instant gratification. and in this they reveal their most profound vulnerability. For there is a power that they do not understand, a dark and silent gift that is the absolute antithesis of their nature, the weapon of patience. Patience is not passivity. It is not the idle waiting of the helpless. It is a focused, strategic, and deeply aggressive act of will. It is the wisdom to understand that time itself is a battlefield, and on that field, the one who can endure the stillness will always have the advantage. Patience is a weapon that drains the strength from the impatient. It is a corrosive acid that eats away at the resolve of those who demand immediate results. The man who rushes into battle reveals his strategy, expends his resources, and exposes his weaknesses. The woman who waits, who observes from a distance, conserves her strength, gathers intelligence, and chooses the perfect, most devastating moment to strike. Machiavelli, a keen observer of the rhythms of power, knew that time is a more relentless and effective destroyer of enemies than any army. Armies can be defeated, but the slow, inexorable march of time is invincible. The one who allies themselves with time, who learns to use its passage as a tool, becomes a force of nature. This is a form of power that is deeply feminine in its essence. It is the power of the seed that waits through the long winter to sprout in the spring, the power of the water that slowly, over millennia, wears away the stone. Consider the image of a solitary woman, sitting calmly beside a massive hourglass. The sand flows relentlessly, and around her, the figures of ambitious, impatient men crumble into dust. Their armor rusts, their swords decay, their bodies turn to bone and then to nothing. But she remains untouched, her face illuminated by a serene, inner light. She is not fighting them. She is simply outlasting them. She has made an ally of the one force they cannot conquer. Her patience is not a virtue. It is a declaration of war against their very nature. This is the power seen in the surreal desert landscape, where the broken statues of once great kings and warriors lie half-buried in the shifting sands. They are the monuments to forgotten conquests, the remnants of lives spent in a furious, ultimately futile rush. And through this graveyard of masculine ambition walks a lone woman, her steps measured and calm, her form untouched by the ravages of time. She is serene, for she understands that true power is not about the fleeting moment of victory, but about the enduring presence that remains when all the battles have been fought and all the noise has faded into silence. Men seek to conquer the world. Women, in their infinite and terrifying patience, are content to inherit it. In the grand and often brutal tapestry of power, there exists a paradox that has haunted the masculine psyche since the dawn of time. It is a power that is not seized through conquest or forged in the fires of conflict, but one that is inherent, primal, and deeply unsettling. It is the power that resides in the womb, the dual, inseparable force of creation and destruction. Women give life. It is their unique and sacred gift, the ability to spin being from the void, to continue the lineage, to ensure the future. And in this act of creation, men have always found both their salvation and their deepest, most unspoken fear. For the power to create is also the power to destroy, not with the clean, simple violence of the sword, but with a far more profound and existential finality. A woman carries within her the power to destroy a man's lineage, to render his legacy meaningless, to turn his ambition to dust. The fidelity of a woman is the fragile thread upon which a man's entire patriarchal world is hung. The question of paternity, the certainty of his bloodline, these are the anxieties that lurk beneath the surface of his dominance. He may conquer kingdoms, but he can never truly conquer the biological reality that his immortality, his name, his very essence, is ultimately in her hands. Machiavelli understood a fundamental principle of power. All power fears its origin, and the origin of all men, from the lowliest peasant to the most powerful prince, is the body of a woman. This creates a dynamic of deep-seated resentment and fear. The man, in his quest for absolute control, is constantly confronted by this one undeniable dependency. He cannot create life on his own. He cannot guarantee his legacy without her. And this reliance is a crack in the armor of his ego, a vulnerability he can never fully seal. Imagine a cinematic painting, bathed in an ethereal, otherworldly light. A woman stands in the center, her expression serene and knowing. In her hands, she holds a glowing orb, a celestial body that is at once a womb, pulsing with the gentle light of new life, and a burning sun, radiating the destructive heat of a supernova. This is the perfect symbol of her paradoxical power. She is the source of all things, the beginning, and she is also the potential end. She can nurture the seed of a dynasty, or she can be the barren ground in which it withers and dies. This duality is the source of her quiet, almost terrifying strength. In the dark, Renaissance-style art of a nursery, a cradle glows with a faint, hopeful light. It is the symbol of legacy, of the future, of the continuation of a name. But behind it, in the deep shadows, loom the skeletal figures of forgotten ancestors, a reminder of all the lineages that have been broken, all the legacies that have ended in silence. The cradle and the crypt are two sides of the same coin, and it is a woman who flips it. Men may build their empires of stone and steel, but they are all, in the end, empires of blood. And the power over that blood, the power of creation and destruction, is a power they can never truly possess. It is a secret that women hold, a silent, ever-present leverage in the eternal war of the sexes. It is the ultimate check on masculine ambition, the quiet, primal truth that all power, in the end, returns to its source. Why, after millennia of evidence, do men continue to ignore this subtle, pervasive, and often overwhelming power that women wield? The answer lies not in a lack of intelligence, but in a profound and willful blindness. It is a blindness born of arrogance, nurtured by ego, and sustained by a deep-seated denial. To acknowledge this other form of power would be to admit that their own, the power of brute force and overt control, is not the only or even the most effective force in the world. And for the masculine ego, this admission is a fate worse than death. Men are conditioned to see the world in a certain way. They see strength in what is loud, what is visible, what is physically imposing. They look for the opponent who meets them on the field of battle, sword in hand. They do not know how to fight a war that is waged in whispers, in silences, in the subtle manipulation of emotion and desire. They dismiss this form of influence as secondary, as trivial as women's games, because to take it seriously would be to enter a battlefield where all their traditional weapons are useless. Their arrogance convinces them that they are the masters of the game, that they are the ones making the decisions, that their will is the engine that drives the world. They see a woman's agreement as submission, her silence as consent, her emotional intelligence as a charming but ultimately powerless quirk of her nature. They see only the surface, for to look deeper would be to confront the terrifying possibility that they are not in control at all. Machiavelli, in his cold assessment of human folly, observed that men are more often destroyed not by the dangers they see, but by the ones they refuse to see. A visible enemy can be fought, but an invisible one, an enemy that you have convinced yourself does not exist, is an enemy that has already won. The man who blinds himself to the power of feminine influence is a man walking unarmed into the most dangerous of ambushes. Imagine a man, his eyes bound by a strip of fine, expensive cloth. He is blindfolded not by an enemy, but by his own hand. He walks with a confident stride, his head held high, convinced of his own strength and the clarity of his path. Yet, he is walking directly towards the edge of a cliff. In the background, a woman watches him. She is not pushing him. She is not luring him. She is simply allowing his own arrogance to lead him to his doom. Her expression is calm, knowing, and utterly devoid of pity. She is not his executioner. She is merely a witness to a self-inflicted fate. This self-imposed blindness is a form of psychological suicide. It is the symbolic painting of an eye, staring intently at its own reflection in a mirror. But the reflection is a hollow void. The eye is not there. The man is so consumed with his own image, his own perception of himself, that he has lost the ability to see the world as it truly is. He has become so enamored with the mask of his own power that he has forgotten the vulnerable face that lies beneath. He ignores the subtle power of women because to see it would be to see himself for what he truly is. Not a king, but a pawn in a much larger and far more complex game. And in this blindness, he seals his own fate. In the unforgiving calculus of governance, where the ambitions of men collide and the foundations of authority are perpetually tested, there exists a fundamental truth, a Machiavellian warning of the highest order. Power ignored is power surrendered. The gravest error a ruler can make is not to be cruel when necessary, nor to be frugal with the state's coffers, but to be blind to the currents of influence that flow beneath the surface of the court. It is in the quiet chambers, the whispered conversations, and the subtle gestures that the true architects of power often reside, unseen and, therefore, dangerously underestimated. Men who ascend to thrones, often through the overt brutality of the battlefield or the shrewd maneuvering of open politics, become accustomed to a certain language of power, a language of steel, of edicts, of visible dominance. They learn to watch their declared rivals, to guard against the ambitious nobleman and the dissenting general. Yet, in their fixation on the conspicuous threats, they fall into a fatal complacency. They overlook the potent, pervasive influence of the feminine, dismissing it as the gentle art of persuasion or the trivial machinations of the domestic sphere. This dismissal is a mortal flaw, for it is in this very underestimation that the seeds of their downfall are sown. They become ensnared in its grasp without the slightest resistance, for one cannot fight a war they do not know is being waged. History provides a somber tapestry of kings and emperors undone by the very forces they deemed insignificant. While they postured and proclaimed, figures like Elizabeth Woodville and Catherine de' Medici navigated treacherous political landscapes, securing power for their kin and shaping the destinies of nations from the shadows. These women and countless others understood a more nuanced form of statecraft, one that did not always rely on the clash of armies but on the careful cultivation of alliances, the strategic dissemination of information, and the exploitation of their male counterparts' vanities and blind spots. They wielded a power that was fluid, adaptable, and, most crucially, invisible to the patriarchal gaze that dominated their age. The throne room, in the end, becomes a silent testament to this truth. A king may sit lifeless, the weight of his crown and the grandeur of his title rendered meaningless. It is not the rival he watched with hawk-eyed suspicion who stands victorious, but the queen, emerging from the shadows she so expertly occupied, who now holds the symbol of ultimate authority. Her victory is not marked by the roar of a crowd or the clang of a sword, but by the profound silence of a battle won before it was ever openly declared. She did not need to raise her voice, for her influence was a current that pulled the ship of state onto the rocks, while the captain was busy scanning the horizon for enemy sails. This is the haunting conclusion to the great game of power, a lesson etched in the annals of fallen kingdoms. The strongest power is not brute force, the kind that batters down gates and raises banners of conquest. It is not the power that is seen, celebrated, or even feared in the open. The most formidable power is the one that is invisible, the one that is ignored, the one that is steadfastly denied. It is the glowing queen on the chessboard, towering over the fallen kings, an ethereal and haunting victor in a game they never truly understood they were playing.